Hello, we're here to talk about the word bias, which is a word from Thursday of week 6, level 4. So bias is a strong feeling in favor of, that means for or against, one group of people or one side in an argument, often not based on a fair judgment. So basically bias is unfairness in people who should be fair. If you use the word bias, it is a bad thing. It's not like, let's say, I love my wife, I think my wife is great. I wouldn't call that bias. That's normal, right? You're with your own family members, you like them a lot. I probably wouldn't use the word bias for that, but I would use bias in a situation where there's someone who's supposed to be fair, for example, for his or her job, but that person is not fair. So my sentence here is political candidates often argue that people in charge of elections show bias for the party that elected them, or that I should say that hired them. In some cases, they're hired, they're appointed, right? But that appointed them. That's like hired. But a lot of times, that's the thing, is they work for political parties. So the other party will say, well, how can you put a Republican in charge of this election, and then they're supposed to be making sure that it's fair for the Democrats? That was a big thing that came up in the 2000 election in Florida. Another example, so thinking about politics because it's politics time in the country, but another good example that people know would be like the referee, el árbitro in a sports game. The referee is supposed to not show bias. The referee is supposed to be unbiased. So, but if a referee favors one team, let's say they start giving a bunch of red cards to the other team to get rid of their best players, and there's not a good reason for it, right? They would say that referee is showing bias, a strong feeling for one team against another team, and that's not fair. Bias is the noun. Bias is the unfairness, injusticia, right? It's the noun. But people mix them up because the pronunciation sounds similar. So they'll say things like, he is bias, but no, you don't say he is bias. Bias is the noun. So you could say somebody shows bias, shows unfairness. If you want to say is, that's an adjective that you need. You could say he is biased, ed. Or the opposite of that would be unbiased. Unbiased is like fair in the way that you're supposed to be. You know, if you're in a position like that where you're in between two sides, you're not supposed to support one side over the other side. Or let's say the judge in a court case is supposed to be unbiased. The attorneys, the lawyers are on each side, but the judge is not supposed to be on one side or the other. The judge is supposed to listen to both sides. So, Spanish preferencia or parcialidad, but in a bad way. It's not preferencia like, this is my preference for what kind of ice cream I like. It's a bad thing. Somebody who shouldn't show support for one side, but they do. Synonyms, prejudice is somewhat related. Prejudice is unfairly judging somebody, basically. Based on for example, what group he or she is a part of. So that would be like bias against that group of people. One-sidedness is a good one. So you're supposed to be on both sides, but you're only favoring one side. Predilection is another synonym. Antonyms for the opposite of bias: impartiality, which is a way to say fairness, or even-handedness. All right, and we need to look at our sentence over here. It is important to examine the bias of an author when reading a persuasive essay, or even actually pretty much any nonfiction. Even a news article. With my class this year, we read 2 news articles on the same news event, and it was really interesting to see that they're different depending on the perspective of the writer. So even news articles show bias. Lots and lots of... You could say that everybody shows some sort of bias. It's hard to be completely fair. So that's it for the word bias. Thank you very much for watching.